They came together earlier this week to meet in Saskatoon, but did the country's leaders find any common ground to discuss this week's first ministers' meeting in the response to the ongoing wildfire fight? We're joined by our political panel. Murray Mandryk writes a political column for Post Media. We're also joined by Jeremy Symes, who covers the legislature and all things Saskatchewan politics for the Canadian Press. Good morning, Jeremy.
Morning.
Good morning, Murray.
Good morning.
Jeremy, let's look back at earlier this week. It was, it seems like it was 2 weeks ago, but you were there.
It was a week ago.
Yes,
Or this week,
it was still this week. What was your big takeaway from being up there?
Yeah, I think the big takeaway was just the tone, the energy. Like the young kids say, the vibes were vibing, I would say. We got no projects list from Prime Minister Mark Carney. That's what we were all kind of looking for. But he says he's now developing a framework, some legislation, through legislation to fast track some of these nation building projects he's talked about, get them built within 2 years. He said he was interested in an energy corridor in Western Canada between Port of Churchill, Manitoba, and northern BC, including a pipeline. But he talked about a pipeline with decarbonized oil. So trying to, expand Canada's oil and gas exports while reduce our emissions, still try and talk about that. He said he liked the Pathways project in Alberta. This is like a big carbon capture project there where they want to capture all the carbon from the oil sands and decarbonize that way. It'd be very expensive though. And he also talked about the Chinese tariffs on Canadian agriculture products and saying he's going to make that a priority to remove them. Now, Premier Scott Moe said it was a good meeting he had. He really likes this energy corridor idea. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith, she's been more of an adversary to Carney, also found it quite productive. She called this idea of decarbonized oil a grand bargain. So that's where she's coming from. Doug Ford, Premier of Ontario, was extremely chipper.
Yes, he was.
He compared Carney to Santa Claus. He came in with these economic gifts. And yesterday, I do want to point out, Premier Scott Moe put on his social media all the premiers with their Saskatchewan Rough Riders jerseys with their names on the back. Mm-hmm. So that is an indication of the vibes. I do want to say that Premier Wab Kinew of Manitoba was not wearing that jersey, as he is a Blue Bombers fan. But that's where we're at right now.
Yeah, that's respectful from Wap Kinew. Murray, just jumping off what Jeremy said there about Doug Ford walking into the meeting singing "Love is in the air." What did you make of that?
I got that reference. I didn't get the Vibes Revive reference. I too am of a certain time period. The aesthetics are normally unimportant. It's always about the substance of any kind of meeting between leaders and what comes out of it. And not a hell of a lot came out of this one. If you look at sort of what was accomplished, maybe we'll get together a list someday in the future that may contain all these neat things that we're talking about. However, in this particular instance, I think aesthetics are important and how they got along. The fact that we didn't have massive outbursts from Danielle Smith or Scott Moe. Scott Moe was not going to be doing that at any point, and he was going to be the congenial host. But there seemed to be a sincere Jeremy probably could sense that more than I, because you have to be there in person to do so, and I wasn't. But there seemed to be a connection between him and Carney. Certainly there was no animosity or even sort of the unusual body language that you would have got with Trudeau, which is basically where, at least for now, the problem lies. I don't know how political leaders out west, including Smith and Moe, play it from now on, because I think there's going to be a lot of pressure, particularly in Alberta, not to get along with the federal Liberal government, because there's a whole voice out there, and one in which politicians here have kind of created in terms of the separatist Western voice, the alienation voice that they've often fed into and played with. And I don't think that they were particularly happy to see the country get along, but kind of does show how things should and can work here. It also shows how you kind of really do need compromise, and sometimes policies do go too far in the other direction. And there was always that argument with the Trudeau government. There a lot of obstreperous politics going on with Scott Moe and Danielle Smith, of course, but there was always reason for their opposition. That seemed to disappear a lot at this conference from what I saw from a distance. And I think that's important.
Obstreperous.
Yeah, that's
Look at you today.
That's an old guy word.
Got your fastball. Jeremy, one of the things that came up from this meeting was, of course, the wildfires. And, Wapkanu, I think, kind of put a bit of a point on the end of the meetings, I thought, with his point about what needs to be done about the wildfires. We had the Premier on Tuesday to talk about that and other things. What has been the reaction from the government and from the opposition on the latest wildfire developments here?
Yeah, for sure. 25 active fires, 900,000 hectares burned. So it's just 2 Prince Edward Islands just under that. Multiple communities evacuated, up to 15,000 people out of their homes. 4,000 values have been lost. So that's homes, cottages, vehicles, and structures. So the problem what officials are saying is this sheer number of fires they have to fight. It's really making it difficult. It's stretching resources quite thin. They have to be everywhere to contain these things. And there's just not been enough rain to handle that. Now, what the opposition called for this week was for Scott Moe to ask for some military aid. Manitoba did receive some help from the military during its fire response. And NDP leader Carla Beck is saying, Ottawa is prepared to help. We had Buckley Boulanger say in the House of Commons, he's the MP for Northern Saskatchewan, saying we're here to help once Saskatchewan asks. And Beck is saying, Saskatchewan shouldn't leave any help on the table. Now, we heard from Moe's office about that, and he said in his statement, the armed forces do play a role in specific areas like aerial evacuations, like fires that are more contained. But that's not what Saskatchewan needs right now. He's saying Saskatchewan needs water bombers, which the military can't provide. And at the same time, the province is speaking with Ottawa to see where there could be some help with humanitarian aid or some evacuation assistance. But that's where things stand right now.
And Murray, there's been calls going, it's every year, but this seems to be more severe this year and earlier for coordination. We heard from people saying that communication could be improved. From your angle, what is some of the bigger issues that are outstanding right now?
All things that you just said are true. Communication needs to be improved. Organization needs to be improved. Even to a large extent, the exchange of personnel, federal, provincial, between moving people around. We need something better systematically in place to allow this to happen in a chaotic situation where there might be simultaneously fires in every province and every province needing the firefighters that they have. I'm not big in terms of calling in the Army immediately because you're putting soldiers in danger. And I guess people will say, well, that's why they're soldiers. But no, professional firefighters and soldiers are two really different things. One is trained to do one specific task and in a dangerous situation, and so is the other, but they're different tasks. And even within the forest fire fighting sector, they're graded in terms of what situations they can go into and what situations they can't. So you can't just throw someone into a situation because they volunteered militarily to protect. This isn't throwing sandbags on a dike or of a flood or anything else. This is something quite different and quite dangerous and maybe not particularly helpful. They need water bombers right now. They need a lot of things. There might be a whole organizational thing. I should write a column, and I probably will, about how we really need to look at our budgeting process and prepare for this every year, which we obviously didn't. If you remember the spring budget with no contingency fund, not only for tariffs, but for this very situation. And now we got a crop coming in, and I'm sure that there's going to be a need for a contingency fund to deal with crop insurance. But all that's aside, I don't necessarily think that the problem is an unwillingness on the part of Scott Moe or a difficulty in terms of communicating with Ottawa for help. I think probably the right and professional decisions are being made and no one's at risk, and whoever wants to make that point online or maybe politically in the opposition benches for political gain, I guess they can, but it doesn't necessarily square with reality.
And we had the auditor's report this week. Jeremy, what were the highlights?
Yeah, there was a couple of things from Tara Clement, the auditor. She urged some more action for supports to help those with opioid addictions. So there's a need for more transitional housing in the province. So people who are addicted, they go get detox treatment, and then they need the help after that. They can't get the help is what she's finding. So they relapse, and then they go back to detox and relapse. So it can be a cycle. So having that transitional housing, we need more of that. Where we do have it in the province, she's saying the wait times are really long. So that needs to go down. And she made a point of just saying, too, in communities where there is no transitional housing, there's been more of a noticeable increase in drug toxicity deaths there as well. The second one she brought up was that I thought was interesting was the independent religious schools. 8 teachers at these schools don't have a high school diploma, which was kind of interesting. The Education Ministry says it's certifying these teachers because these schools can't seem to find the ones they need to work there. I will note that these schools aren't funded by the provincial government, but Clemette's report also noted there's other independent schools that are funded by the government that do need some additional oversight. They just need to make sure that students there are getting the outcomes that they should get once they graduate.
Murray, what stood out to you?
I'm going to carry on in terms of the issue that Jeremy just raised in terms of independent schools not having teachers. No, interestingly, they don't have any teachers that actually have are certified teachers in this province when we actually do need certified teachers in this province. But I can't imagine a situation more ridiculous than someone teaching even in elementary school level and not having a high school diploma. We just graduated 10,000 kids this June in this province. 10,000. Every one of them is going to be more qualified to teach than 8 out of 12 cases in which the auditor examined, which they found out they had no high school diploma. We need better monitoring of this situation. We need better monitoring of outcomes, as Tara Clement said in her report. It's a completely sound and rational position to take. And why on God's green earth the government hasn't taken that position, I have no idea. This is just fascinating to me. But this is sort of this problem with independent religious schools that's developed over now more than 2 decades, even going back to the NDP days, where they just have never been properly monitored, all under the excuse, well, you know, if you want to properly monitor us, fund us. No, there has to be certain standards met one way or the other. And it's just a bottom line related to the kids. We know what happened at Legacy. We know the problems in here, the extent elsewhere when you don't have professionals. And these are our kids. They're going to go out in the world.
Murray, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Jeremy, thank you.
You're welcome.